Okay. Looks like we're live. I'm going to get live with my... There we go. I'll just leave it on like this. There you go. I'm only going to leave this on for a few minutes, but just so everyone can see we're in the holiday spirit. I've actually got to make a brisket for Hanukkah on Friday or Saturday too, so hitting multiple holidays.
And Greg the Buddhist is here with Zen Mist tea.
There you go.
Japanese pine in the back. My own.
Well, welcome everybody who's filing in now to see us talk about the Santa Rita Hills and much more again today. I am Matt Kettmann. I'm a journalist with the Santa Barbara Independent and Wine Enthusiast magazine. We are joined today by just one guest, which I don't think that's happened before on this series. We're here with Greg Brewer from Brewer Clifton Winery, who Wine Enthusiast magazine named their our winemaker of the year for 2020. Here's a nice article that I wrote about Greg, and this is I would say probably our fiercest category of competition when it comes to us on the editorial team debating who's going to be winemaker of the year and that sort of thing. So we're going to talk to Greg a little bit about his career, and we have 3 really cool wines to try that span all the way back to 2009. So that'll be fun. I'm going to have to turn this off now because it's driving me a little crazy already. Maybe I'll turn it on later too. So we started this series with the Santa Rita Hills Wine Alliance back in June, and we've since interviewed more than 30 producers. So trying to bring a little bit of Santa Rita Hills to you, since we can't exactly visit it as easily as we have in the past due to COVID, and now we're again in a shelter-in-place order, and so it's making it difficult again. But hopefully, we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. And some of these vaccines will start coming through, which that seems like all systems go for that. So, in other news, my book finally came out this last week, so you can get your hands on a copy of this beast of a book. Vines and Visions, Winemakers of Santa Barbara County, which I did with photographer Macduff Everton. We've been actually distributing them, the bulk orders out of Greg's place in Lompoc. So I've been seeing Greg quite a bit the last couple of weeks at Brewer Clifton. He was nice enough to let us use some of his empty space to kind of move these books out. So we're almost done with that process, and now you can find them at a bunch of wineries around town, bookstores, that sort of thing. So makes a great Christmas or Hanukkah present, or any kind of present you need around this time of year. So without further ado, Greg Brewer, congratulations on being named Winemaker of the Year by Wine Enthusiast.
Thank you.
Was this a surprise to you, or what? How did you take this? I mean, was this something you saw coming, or no?
Yeah, no, it was totally a surprise. I mean, I think, I'm still really blown away. I think what's interesting too is that when I received the nomination, that really struck me, and for me that was really the win, to be acknowledged in that capacity with those other, 5 or 6 colleagues around the world. And when I first heard, I assumed it was California, or assumed it was Santa Rita or Lompoc or F Street. I didn't know how big the pool was, but I was still super stoked. And then, it sank in, and I was so thrilled that was going on. And then really, when the editor called me to let me know that I had won, I almost didn't believe it, and because I already had won, you know what I mean, in my eyes, and by that I also, I want to stress that, as some people might have heard before, I really mean it. I mean that the award, the recognition is crazy flattering, and I thank everyone who was involved in selecting me. But really, for me, it's something that we all own, in Santa Rita Hills and in Santa Barbara County. I'm a product of this area. For 30 years, I've been here. I've only worked here. I'll only work here. I was trained by people here. I mean, I am like the Santa Rita kid, in a lot of ways. And everything we do is to display that landscape, to display that appellation to transmit the ocean with clarity and vulnerability. And so if that trajectory over these 20, 30 years has, with that being recognized in the way it is, it's not me, I'm careful, I work hard, that's fine. But it's really, it's us. It's everyone who trained me. It's everyone who works around us. It's everyone who's going to come in the future. And so that's the celebration for me. And that's the element about which I'm the most proud, for sure.
Right. No, I think obviously you are a poster child for the region. Like few others, you were one of the first to champion it back in the 90s, way before it was actually an appellation. And you were one of the early wineries to put the names of vineyards on your labels too. At a time when a lot of places were more focused on appellations and regions, you guys were like, why don't we just highlight the place itself? And I think that's obviously such a huge trend now that it's almost dominant to some extent. Now, if you're going to be especially you're talking Pinot Noir, if you're going to be a high-end Pinot Noir maker, you better be putting a vineyard name on there. People are going to be like, where's this from? They're going to want to know, So I think you not only highlighted this region, but you really helped change the game when it came to, really highlighting place and giving credit to actual names of places too. So did people look at you weird when you started doing that? Way back?
No, because really, you're so kind to kind of, give us that type of, recognition for so doing. But really, people were, obviously the historic, Burgundy reference points people were, and then closer to home, Williams was, really close to us at Santa Barbara Winery. And so the Williams Sellium model, Woodcraft, Clendenin, Tally, Sanford, other people were doing it, Ojai Vineyard, other people were doing it locally, Babcock, of course. And so that was like the model that we saw. And when we started, a lot of us are kind of products of Wine Cask in a lot of ways, either having worked there or spent a lot of time there. And that Wine Cask Futures program, back in the 90s was like the most exciting thing in the world. I remember like waiting outside Wine Cask, like when I knew the brochure was going to be released, and I'd like open up the first box and I'd take it and jam home. And I like memorized it, learning, what's Clendenin doing? What's Ojai doing? What's Brian doing? What's, and learning about all of that and the techniques and the names and the price points. And that was really sexy. And so we simply just jumped on that. And Steve and I, training wise, leading up to that, just like you said, a lot of things were a little bit more broad. Things were Santa Barbara, right? As far as a lot of bottlings. And we saw all this componentry, going together and being harmonized in those wines for the other wineries for whom we were in service and working. And so we thought, how cool to deconstruct it, right? And what's interesting, I think about wine, just like fashion, cars, music, everything else, things evolve, right? Things kind of, pendulums kind of swing back and forth and people progress through time. But it's interesting, when we started, it was like, we'll never blend vineyards and we're going to raise the vineyards the exact same year in and year out, which we still do, and that's great. And we're never going to blend them. And then come 2007, Steve and I had a chat up in our office, and I think he proposed it. He's like, gosh, we should really assemble these, because now we've demonstrated this deconstructed appellation for all these 11 or 12 years. Let's actually put it back together and tell what Santa Rita is about. And so really, while of course we still do the designates, and that's, the three wines that we have today, kind of coincidentally, I guess, a lot of my emphasis going forward now is actually kind of going back, to Santa Rita Hills. And I love the responsibility of that. I love, when you have your name on a label, it's one thing, right? You're responsible for it. It's fine. But if things are weird, it's like you have yourself in the mirror to look at, and that's fine. You put your whole neighborhood's name on a label, and that's a whole different story, right? Because now that wine is like part of the quilt work of everybody else, and I don't want our patch to be lame, right? I want our patch to catch people's attention, and so it's kind of a different mindset, and it's super important, So. Right. So that's that.
Let's touch base on the wines we're going to try tonight, since we didn't do that right away. So you carefully selected these, and you can tell us a little bit about why. But what we are drinking, if you happen to have them at home with us, or with us, we have the Brewer Clifton 2009 Mt Carmel. Mt Carmel, obviously a very historic and fascinating vineyard. We had a whole show on it a couple weeks ago. We could talk a little bit about that. Then we have the 2012 3D Chardonnay, Brewer Clifton, obviously. And then for the reds, we're jumping forward in time, and we'll be trying the 2018 Machado vineyard, BC. So actually, before you tell us why you picked these wines, one of the quotes I loved from you in the book was that when you came to town and you kind of connected with Steve Clifton, the co-founder of Brewer Clifton, you guys were way more in this like LA vibe. I think you say something like eyeliner and flannel or tattoos versus a lot of the winemakers here at the time were more flannel wearing hippies and stuff like that. So you guys must have been kind of a different look for the scene. Were people immediately friendly and accepting of you back in those days, or were you a little like the new kids that people didn't know how to take you?
Yeah. All depressed and like listening to The Cure. Everyone has always been amazing. This community is ridiculous, and certainly in a good way, and certainly 80s, 90s, like the camaraderie and the family factor was incredible. Bruno, they're people like big brothers and sisters. Lane, Bruno, I can go on and on and on. The players too, as the people that are joining us. And so we always totally felt embraced and welcomed and everything else. And it was simply, we were a subsequent generation. Sometimes now it's very flattering. I'm kind of almost lumped in with the people that were like the first ones. And they're like, oh, Greg was so, pivotal or, helpful in establishing XYZ. And that's cool. And I usually take it because it's nice. I'm like, oh yeah, it's all because of me. There's like a lot of time, the better part of, 10, 20 years, between Pierre Lafont and Richard Sanford and Brian and Jim and Adam and Bruno, all these people that Lane, Rick Longoria, that really kind of got things going. And they're a little bit older, right? And so they were raised in a different era, right? Just like the millennials will kind of have their own vibe and they approach the craft and sales and marketing in their own way. We were largely products of LA in the 80s, right? So just different music, different vibe, different things. And so everyone was really nice to me, but it wasn't until I met Steve. And we became like crazy immediate fast friends because it felt like me, there was a hook there, and he's very different, right? Just like, and so again, I'm rambling, but always super embraced, yet the two of us kind of shared something that was a little bit unique, I thought, and I still think.
Right. Did that bring anything to the winemaking, do you think? So, like new ideas or?
No. A lot of what we were doing was just taking from what we had learned. Just like everybody, it was like, oh, I know that Babcock does this or Bruno does that, or, so-and-so does this. And then it was kind of like, well, let's really go for it, and we, we did, as far as, whole cluster Pinot and, gravity everything and tiny lots and waxing and hand bottling and wood boxes and wood shavings and tissue wrapping and hand numbering labels. And, we didn't mince words. We didn't want to come into it like, oh, we'll kind of pour us, we're going to kind of limp along. And if things go well, then we'll kind of like raise prices or do whatever. We're like, well, this is where we want to jump into the marketplace. And really, if you think about it, it's been 26 years, 25 years. And, there's Brewer Clifton pricing now, which is basically the same as what it was 25 years ago. And things have never been better as far as estate holdings and acumen. And
right. One of our viewers, and it's a good story, wants to know about how you guys came up with this label.
Ferris, my boy. Matt Ferris is the most enthusiastic, amazing human being ever in Kansas City. Love you, brother. Thanks for joining. You love that guy. So the logo is from Winecast, right? So we were we were kind of thinking about what logos would represent us, and we're designing our own and looking into Middle Eastern art and kind of exploring different things. And then, there was one night I was at the bar at Wine Cask, which is kind of where it is now, I guess, and looked up at the ceiling and, saw that gold stenciling, with which a lot of us are familiar on the call. And I thought, wow, that part of the logo is cool. And it kind of represents what we're talking about encapsulating. And so I literally sketched it on a napkin and presented it, board meeting, PowerPoint. I was like, oh, hey, what do you guys think? And everyone thought it was cool. And then, so I got a disposable camera and, took 12 pictures and had them developed. And then photocopied one of them and then kind of like cut out the extra parts. And I was using Santa Barbara Winery's copy machine. Don't tell them. But I did that. And there's like the spots where the copy machine didn't quite make it black. And so I used a Sharpie and colored it in, and that became our art. And that was it. So I love that it's this kind of discrete Santa Barbara reference. And it also is very loyal to Wine Cask, without which I don't know if we'd even be here. Their futures program was so huge for us, that first year, because we started with $12,000, right? And so we started and we had a couple tons of Pinot and a ton and a half of Chardonnay, or 2 and 2, whatever it was. And some neutral barrels that we got from Fess Parker. Eli totally hooked us up. Everyone was so nice to us, right? And but that was it. We kind of spent all of our money. And so it was pivotal for us to sell wines as in futures, right? And so we jumped on the futures program. The fact we were accepted in that program was massively like the adrenaline and everything else for David Russell to kind of take us, who's the buyer then, to put us in company with our heroes and heroes to this day. But to see us in that catalog, I'll never forget. I'm almost emotional now thinking about it. But then being able to sell some wines pre-release gave us money for packaging. And then it's always kind of been that leapfrog for the better part of 25 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, was there, that kind of leads into a good question, which is, was there a point when you now you're winemaker of the year, so I think we can safely say that you've made it in some capacity, and your winery seems to be owned by Jackson family now, but you're still heavily involved, if not more involved than maybe ever before. So you're in a good place financially and all that. When did you get to a point where you thought you were by some measure successful and stable, or does that even happen in winemaking?
It does, and I think it's fleeting too. So if I can, I talk about mentorship a lot, especially at my age and this stage of my career. And so if any young colleague is listening, a lot of those things can be fleeting, right? And obviously enjoy them and get behind them. But there was a bunch of media attention that we received around 99, 2001, which was awesome, and it really bolstered up our mailing list. That gave me the confidence to get the tattoo. Up until that point, I was like, let's see how this business goes, because that would be a sore reminder every day. And so there was that stage. And then we were jamming along. And it was a time when everything was different. People were buying in a different way. The media was different. And we were cranking, and what led us to take over Mt Carmel, what led us to plant 3D, what led us to plant Machado. There was this era of confidence, and that was great. And we were growing and doing our thing. And in the course of time as well, there were a lot of twists and turns along the way, be it personal or economic, in the case of the kind of changing of the economy in 08, 9, 10, 11, which is kind of part of this 09 study, that, some twists and turns. And there are some eras not that long ago where it was thin ice, so it goes from like, oh yeah, let's plant vineyards. Why not? We need the fruit, to like, oh, how are we going to make payroll? And that span is a number of years. So that's kind of the nature of the beast a little bit, I think, this business.
And is there anything you've done, and this isn't just for winemakers, but advice you have for people who are in those sort of circumstances? Is there any techniques or just patience techniques that you learn, like how not to freak out when you're on the thin ice parts?
Yeah, no, maintaining composure is big. And, if there's no plan B, it's different, right? You act in a different way. Sonia and I talk about that all the time. There's, when it's your business and there's nowhere to fall back to, it's like you make decisions out of need, not like, oh God, that's a bummer, let's see what happens. You're like, this has to work. So I think that, and it's almost like a fight or flight thing in your brain. So you have that like, oh gosh, I've got to survive, yet you still have to maintain creativity, right? Kind of like my octopus tattoo, right? The different arms. And so it's, if not to be like downer, why the wine business is so terrible, but when things are darker, you've got to figure out ways to kind of keep the lights on, right? So, custom crush, sell fruit, whatever it is, you adapt, you have to adapt to kind of make things happen. Almost like everyone's done this past year. I mean, the fact that we're doing this now is a good example.
Right. Let's talk about the Mt Carmel.
So Mt Carmel, I picked this for a couple of reasons. One, because you talked about it with Brian and Matt, who I adore, and just that was a beautiful episode. It made me think of it. And Mt Carmel is one of those vineyards where, what Brian has done in the appellation, like, is amazing. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for his being 9 years, 50 years ahead of everybody else, as he's always been, with vineyard designating and risk-taking and extreme winemaking and being cool. And so, Mt Carmel, I remember looking up at Mt Carmel back, in the 90s, and I was like, oh my gosh. I think it was like his 95 Mt Carmel, and had a really awesome, like, diagonal label. We had it at your house that night, like, years and years ago. It was so sexy, and they had it at Wine Cask. And I remember Steve and I saved up to get it. And we had it one night. We were in Steve's apartment on Chapala. I remember it as if it were yesterday, and it was like over 25 years ago. And it's just a very special place. And so we gained access to a little bit of Chardonnay in 2000, was the first time we worked with it. And then starting in 2005, we took over the management of the vineyard. And so it was our first foray into vineyard management with our small team. It was also one of those vineyards that, like, I never even thought I would be able to, like, go to visit. I mean, it was that, like, it's like the convent. I mean, the whole thing is so heavy up there. You're looking at it. And so I wanted to share something tonight that was that. And 2009, kind of a cold year, some, just different things going on. And some people that know me pretty well, all these wines should be vulnerable. They should demonstrate, like, place and sometimes maybe demonstrate, like, state of mind a little bit. And so, it was at a stage where I was needing to control whatever I could in my life. And so it was a cold year, and it's a pretty high-strung upbringing, even for us, of wine. And so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of see it now. And it's still pretty pristine and tight.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I thought that'd be a fun one to start with tonight.
Yeah, for those who don't know much about Mount Carmel, the vineyard is on top of the true Santa Rita Hills on the, south side of the mountains, looking south over the San Ynez River, over Santa Rosa Road. Has this crazy monastery, like, not even half built, like third built monastery that's been sitting there in complete disrepair for decades now, basically. And it just has this crazy mystery to it. The place itself is pretty extreme. It's all, it's just windblown as all can be, I guess. And so what years did you guys have kind of total control up there? So
it was 2005 through 11. Yeah.
Okay.
2005 through 11. And that's interesting too, because Steve's family, he spent a fair amount of time growing up in Oklahoma. And so, like, the rural thing was a little more familiar for him than me. But I was like LA, West Side. I didn't know seasons existed really when I got in this business. And so certainly I didn't know where food came from. I mean, I ate like bread and mac and cheese and popcorn and like donuts and whatever. So I didn't really and so, to be then like shopping for a tractor and things like that was really, it's pretty funny looking back. It's a big stretch for me, but it was when we were able to kind of do that, it was super exciting. And then, so that was 2005. And then in 2007, we started planting our own vineyard, since we now had this management kind of team in place. And that's what brings us to the next wine, which is the 2012 Chardonnay from 3D, which is right down Mail Road from Mt Carmel, a vineyard that we were planning on planting exclusively to Chardonnay, about which we've always been really enthusiastic. And it's always been like 50-50 for us, really, Chardonnay and Pinot. And back then, this is like post Sideways, everyone is planting 100% Pinot ranches. And so we thought, wow, like we need Chardonnay, like in a great spot, farmed with care. And so that's what prompted us to do this. And going from 09, that was cold. 12 was like really powerful, like big, full, intense, powerful as far as the vintage goes. So I thought that'd be fun to kind of have that side by side of as different as vintages can be in our neighborhood, from two vineyards that are different for sure, but still on the same road and kind of the same neighborhood, kind of.
Right. Did you ever? I mean, I can almost always pull a BC Chard out, especially like in a lineup, even your older ones. So you definitely have a style that's distinctive. Did you ever go into like more of a butterball style? Was there like a real buttery phase for you guys at all, or no? It's always been kind of tight.
No, so for Brewer Clifton, it's always been, everything's been raised the same. We've never wavered. It's a very strict place, and it's not for everybody. I mean, it's discipline and ritual at Brewer Clifton, really more than winemaking per se. And so it's always the same. At the beginning, we employed a little bit of new oak, like 15%. I mean, it was pretty conservative. And then starting in 07, again, we moved into our current building. We switched to a technical cork. We had our own farming team. We started making our way. Starting in 2012, we became purely estate. So during that era, it was like, neutrality and kind of like next level, almost like, 12 years into doing anything. It's like we graduated and, at this stage we're going to college kind of, and just refining. But the whole premise of BC is to really kind of remove everything that I do professionally, I guess, to like remove myself, right? And to raise things in a very elementary, a very carnal, a very almost barbaric way, very, very raw and kind of unbridled. And that's, and in so doing, technically what we do is essentially nothing. It's barrel fermented. The barrels are 10 to 15 to 25 years old. In the case of both of these wines, all of our wines, we've had these for like our whole career. And that's it. They're pressed, they're settled overnight. They go to barrel, they ferment in barrel. They're not stirred. Mallow usually doesn't happen. They're topped every 7 days and they're bottled a year or so later. It couldn't be more simple. And I also appreciate, something that Dee said at that anniversary tasting that we did at Wine Cask, that you so kindly attended. And he said the same thing as you just did. And it really means more to me than I think anybody knows when you can recognize the wine. And I love that you can recognize it without us really even doing anything per se. It's like not like a trick we do that makes it taste a certain way. It's very naked. I mean, that's Santa Rita. I mean, that's what this place is all about.
Right. And having been in your facility a good amount the last week or so, like it is kind of the more, and I'm sure we're clearly just out of harvest, so it's not the craziest time of year, but it is the most organized facility I've ever seen. Everything's in its place. Everything is very clean. And you actually seem to have a little bit of space. Sometimes people have no space at all, but it's a very well maintained. And you've always been that way. I mean, from the get-go, that's just your personality.
Yeah, it's calming. It's calming for me to kind of control the environment as best we can. And everything has its place, and there's not a whole lot there either, right? I mean, there's 4 screwdrivers, and there's 3 crescent wrenches, and there's 1 hammer. I mean, there's 6 stainless steel buckets. I mean, it's for a place of our size, it's almost like home winemaker scale in some ways. And everything is there for a reason, and it's where it is for a reason, right? So that's the key part. And then having space and the efficiency has always been something I've tried to have around me because it's calming for me. Like a more chaotic environment stresses me out. And a lot of people are the opposite. They're artists that are like they love to have stuff everywhere, and that that kind of mind. And I totally respect that and value that. It's just not me. Things have to be very kind of in their spot. Plus, for so long, I've had a lot of jobs. To keep Brewer Clifton going, or whatever, out of loving those jobs. And so, if especially during harvest time, the timing gets impacted, and so there was never a whole lot of time to, kind of move everything around in order to take care of what you needed to take care of. So having a people space always made sense.
Right. Great. Should we move into the Pinot as we move on here?
So, dear Barbara Satterfield, this is Machado. So this, we planted this vineyard a year after 3D. This was planted in 2008. on the Machado's beautiful, beautiful property. And I love, like we were talking about, like you touched on earlier about vineyard designating and using names and some names that people didn't really know. That always really excited us. Antonio, hey buddy. He was so, they tell me these formative, beautiful people, right? They've known me since I was 21 years old. It's so cool to see the names. Like, it struck me up. But, in the case of, for BC, when we started, others were doing Sanford and Benedict. Others were doing Bendecito and Sierra Madre and everything else. And so we always sought to kind of go a little under the radar with Sweeney and, Huber. Things like Rick Longoria hooked me up with. And so, that was great. Rio Vista, before everyone had ever heard of Rio Vista. Things that we were doing. And then, planting vineyards, of course, is a big deal. And the Machado family, I've worked with several of them. They're so kind. They're so trusting. We trust each other. And for, again, LA kid, right, to be now like accepted into their landscape, literally, is a huge responsibility and one I don't take lightly. And I love promoting their family's name. I love being part of their legacy locally, right? So they've got, the Machados have been there since 1917. So, over 100 years now, they've been committed to that land. And the generations that have been there, and the houses and cattle and beans and row crops and leasing and everything else. And now knowing we have this little 14-acre thing, and then again, through our own little kind of, ways, through the facility at Lompoc, to be able to kind of get this wine out around the world and their family's name and telling the story of their family's name around the globe is really meaningful to me. And I love that reciprocal trust that we all share, with Renee and Barbara and others. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it's definitely a well-known name now, I would say, in the wine world. When did you plant that vineyard?
So this was in 2008, and there's one note. When we do designate wine, like we determine what section will go into the designate before we even plant, right? Because we don't blend the way people blend. Like, we put a ring on it and we're like, oh, this block will be the Machado, and any excess volumetrically out of that section will go into Santa Rita, and the rest of it into Santa Rita. So there's one knoll on the property. It kind of rises up. You mentioned Castle Rock earlier. It kind of rises up, kind of, and touches the back of Dan's property. It's this beautiful, sexy. It's not like a crazy cliff. It's like this beautiful little knoll. We put 2 clones of Pinot Noir there that are really our primary 2 clones. One's called 37 that I got from Mary Edwards. We got from Mary Edwards, and then the other's 459 that we got from Sea Smoke. They both lend themselves to stem inclusion beautifully, I think. This little section of the vineyard's cool. And so this wine is always 50-50 of those 2 selections, all whole cluster, our normal kind of fermentation thing, and then aged for 18 months in our oldest barrels. Most of these barrels are over 20 years old. Wow.
And do you, when you were doing stem inclusion back in the 90s, was that, that was something kind of new for the new world at that time, and people had kind of gone away from that and were using bigger oak influence, or were people using stem and then they kind of went to the oak influence after? Like, where were you guys in that?
It's kind of like neckties or facial hair or something, as far as like, no, it's like it's cool or it's not or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And so I remember when we started, I was trained by Bruce, and Bruce de-stems everything now, which is funny. But back then, he relied a lot on stem inclusion. Chris Whitcraft was there all the time, and he was obviously all whole clustered. Burt Williams was heavy with stems. And those were like my formative fathers or brothers, whatever. And I remember tasting all the lots at Santa Barbara, and it was like the sexiest fruit that would come in from, or for, working with Whitcraft a teeny bit, because he hung out with us a lot. And like all the epic fruit got whole cluster, and I was like, okay, well, if that's what you do with epic fruit, then that's what I'm going to go for. You learn that way. That's how kids learn how to do, that's just how you learn things. And so that was kind of the trajectory. And then getting into it, I remember there was a couple, like the first World of Pinots, like the technical symposiums, and there's some, kind of more experienced producers that kind of took me aside, and they're like, oh, you'll learn, like, that's not what it's about. Like, I used to do that too, and you're young and cocky, and like, and there were some times in the 90s where the wines aren't awesome. 98 was a tricky vintage to do stem, like you need to have your systems tight, for it to be regularly successful. as far as, farming clones, leaf thinning, picking, what you used to, devil's in the details. And so it's like blowfish or raw chicken or something. You kind of have to know what you're doing. And so that's really one of the things. And Santa Rita really lends itself to stems for us, picking the way we do, planting where we have. And so, we've always done it. And I think that with varying, it's always been successful enough. There were some weird potholes, again, kind of late 90s, but you learn from your mistakes. And so, and hopefully we're fine from there.
Yeah. I mean, I like a wide variety of Pinot Noirs, but stems always just add so much more intrigue and complexity to me when it comes to this particular grape,
They can, especially in Santa Rita, it's big and juicy and intense. And so, for us anyway, the aesthetic is like big, ripe, like hoisin plum kind of, raspberry kind of thing that's reined in by stems, almost like a little brush of soy at a sushi bar. You know what I mean? You've got this like fatty, succulent fish, and then that little brush of soy frames it. Yeah. It renders it more savory. Stems kind of do the same thing for us. Right. And I think Santa Rita is a perfect spot to do it.
Right. I think we were going to have some special guests join us towards the end of this conversation, which is coming up now. I don't know if Barbara is got some of these people lined up. I think Barbara's going to come in and say hi too.
Yeah.
Hey, Barbara.
Hey. So, Greg, just on behalf of the Santa Rita Hills, I wanted to congratulate you on your Winemaker of the Year. It's so awesome. And on a personal level, I really want to thank you for being a part of our ranch and family's legacy, and are helping keep it going with the Machado vineyard. We love having you there, and it's just been really, really a fun experience. So
thank you. Thanks for trusting me.
Thanks so much for that. Love it. And I'm going to go now. We've got somebody else who's going to pop in.
Not me.
Whoa. Dumpster.
Yeah, buddy.
Hey, kid.
What's up, brother? Congratulations, man.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Cheers. Wish I had some reason.
So, Graham, you worked with Greg in your formative days. What was he like? Nice guy?
Oh
like
my God.
Taskmaster.
Which decade? I mean, from like heavy metal drummer to yes, this guy's a total character. Pretty influential guy, that's for sure. We are so lucky to have him in this area, and then I am like triple lucky to have him as a mentor and just as there for such a enormous part of my life. Actually, I've known Greg since I was about 16 years old. And we've had a lot of fun together. We've seen a lot of crazy grapes and endless harvest stories. But it's really spectacular to have you as a friend and part of this area, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks, buddy. I love you.
Love you too, man. Drinking some 2010.
Yeah, me.
Nice.
That's the way we roll.
Did anything that Greg teach you about Chardonnay, did that apply to any of your Riesling, or are those two different ballparks?
Well, very much so. I mean, Chardonnay. With this, I mean, how much time do we have here, Matt?
Not a whole lot.
Well, I think especially Greg really emphasizing like less variables, making the site the most important factor in the wine, and then just less outside influence, but then being cognizant of what those influences are, and respectful to that way the site, the grape, and the winemaking. It's very much this just less is so much more mentality, and that's how my Rieslings are made. That's really how all of the wines are made. And that's like that spirit is so much part of Greg.
Right. Well, that's true. And that makes a lot of sense for Riesling too, which is a very transparent wine, or can be, should be, as you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you remember about Graham, Greg, when this 16-year-old walked through the doors? What'd you think?
Being so hardcore, like he'd skateboard to work and like just, I mean, again, someone who was driven and purposeful and like willing, not even willing, but like a burning desire to do, like to cut his own path, you know, and, you know, to, you know, explore, to commit completely to Riesling, right? To have like barbed wire on the label at the beginning because we told him that would be cool, you know. And you know, and it's great. I mean, and we did have, you know, these beautiful times at Santa Barbara, you know, these crazy harvest nights, and like when you just don't even think you're ever going to get out of it, and like you bond. I mean, there's like those beautiful bonding moments. Some kitchens are the same, or you know, the same kind of thing. And it's interesting that we're, you know, we had this 09 Mount Carmel because 09, my assistant at Melville had some personal things to deal with, and so I kind of had to muscle through that harvest on my own there, and then BC, and then Graham came kind of back into my fold, you know, because he was really the only person that could be me, you know what I mean, and to step into my little universe because he knew it. He knew it from the beginning. He saw the beginning of BC. He saw way before BC. You know, he lived through it all as well. And so, you know, at that time, I really was in a really challenging spot. You know, it was like I had bitten off a fair amount because of circumstance. And then, you know, he very, very graciously stepped in and was, you know, we were together for another 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it was during that era. And that totally helped to buoy me up because otherwise I'm not sure how I would have dealt with it. You know, the economy was getting weird. I had some personal issues that were complicated. And so, you know, for Graham to kind of be there supporting me was huge.
You got it, buddy.
Oh, we got more special guests. Richard and Tekla Sanford.
Hi, Greg.
Hi.
And our dog was
dog.
Congratulations, Greg.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you for everything.
For you.
Thank you.
I gotta get the dog out of here just a second. Come on.
I'm only here because of your thermometer.
Oh, well, thank you. I was just opining on the whole thing and thinking this is really truly perseverance. You know, I know it's not been easy for you, but boy, you've spent the time and effort and the passion. You know, I think that Matt is truly what you call passion winemaking and passionate. So we salute you and congratulate you. It's just so marvelous for the whole region, but for you especially.
I thought you were still a little boy, but you're not anymore.
I feel to say you're not Graham.
Hi, Graham.
Graham is still 16.
Everyone's
Maturity-wise, we get capped out there.
Aren't we proud of Matt and his contribution? It's just so wonderful. Congratulations, Matt.
Yeah, the book is.
Yeah, thank you.
Marvelous.
Yeah, thanks for everything you do for us, Matt.
Yeah, and thank you, Richard, for writing that you know, amazing foreword to the book too. I think it really, you know, when you agreed to do that early on, it was like, okay, the right people are lining up to help this project. So,
Well, again, there's passion there, and I think that comes through. It just rings. It does, don't you think, Greg? I mean,
Absolutely.
we've had the discussion before. Greg is, and Graham has that. He Mr. Reese, right? But
Or Bruner.
our Bruner,
Oh, careful. That might be a bad word in here.
Yeah. Yeah, Graham can use a little more focus, but that's okay.
I know.
Are you not
It's
doing
been a few years. It's time to fold them back into
No, I am. 3 varieties. I'm getting a little greedy.
you've actually got Riesling and Gruner together too.
Yeah, no, also, we shouldn't talk about that, Matt. Taboo.
well, now you guys, now I saw a sign on the line Cantata, some of the Pinot Noir rows that said Kettmann.
Yeah, that's because Macduff was buying some, and for some reason, Coastal Vineyard Care thinks that Macduff and I are the same person. So they just let me in. They also sent me the bill, and I was like, "This is not mine."
That was Macduff doing it, that's for
Big
sure.
debut.
Yeah, Macduff did like a ton at Long Cantata. He did it at Kunin, and they were extremely helpful and educational to him. He was there every day with Mary doing punch downs, and Mary got super stoked on cleaning the press or the distemper, I think the press, because you clean it with the hot water, and she thought of it as a spa treatment. So one day she showed up with a terry cloth robe as a
Oh,
joke.
that's fun. Oh,
Greg, I
that's
think you have
great.
something there.
Was this was this at your winery, Greg, where they made where Macduff? Where did Macduff make his?
No,
He was
this
doing
is
it-
Kettmann, I think. Yeah.
At Coonan. But we are at Greg's distributing the book, so we've been hanging out there quite a bit the last couple weeks. So, but yeah, it's been fun. I think there was one more. Was there one more guest? Hopefully,
Greg, we
he's
love
making it.
We love you.
you. Okay.
Richard, what was it like to see? I mean, obviously, you knew when you started making wine in the early '70s that there was going to be a next generation, and you've seen a few generations come through. When did you notice that Greg was going to be a special person? A great winemaker, I should say, not a special person.
He did a lot of hanging around, as I remember. Just very inquisitive and want to know why things worked in the way they did. But also, I think, really connected with the natural forces. There's something about passion in winemaking connecting with nature. I like so much. In fact, I think we discussed that. Oh, here, we can plug it right in there.
No, we're using my iPad.
Oh.
I'm about to run out of energy here.
Anyway,
So I'm trying to plug it in. We've got a
With
real,
the Sanfords, it's so good.
what is it called? Rube something?
Rube Goldberg.
Rube Goldberg setup here. We're not like,
Logically challenged people.
no, we're not. But we're a little bit funky with it. So that's great.
Anyway,
I'm drinking vodka, by the way. Sorry.
That's the goal. That's the ending. Yeah.
Truth serum.
Her father had a drink called a Shabodka. It was white wine and vodka.
Basically, it was his way to hide the vodka from my mother. End of story. He
No,
hid it in the Chardonnay.
The thing about it, Matt, you and I had discussed that beautiful article by Eric Asimov that talked about early on in the pandemic, earlier this year, he was trying to think of things to write about wine, and everything seemed sort of frivolous with everything else going on in the world. But a few months into it, he reflected on it, and he wrote the most beautiful article about tasting nature through wine. I don't know if you guys saw that, but
I think Matt did, didn't you, Matt?
I did, yeah.
that for people who are city dwellers and people in urban spaces don't have an opportunity to have our experiences that we have in the vineyard and connecting with the place. And definitely wine connects people to place. And Eric so beautifully said that. And I think that when you recognize there's a young person that has that connection with the place and respect for the place, that's when true winemaking happens, I think, to engineer that together with that sort of philosophy. So I think that seeing Greg's enthusiasm for wondering why things work and how they work, that connecting with nature in that place really brings it all together. Graham is another person that connects that way. And
Thank you.
I'm so hopeful that other people see that, that there is the frivolous side of it, and there's the raw side and the excitement. But, in the end of the day, as Greg would tell you, it's a very pensive kind of activity. It's very singular. And, some of my best times have been late at night in the cellar or early in the morning. And that's when the magic
Or early in
comes
the
through.
morning in the vineyard.
Yeah, but that's the
Tracker.
magic part, really. You get that, Matt, doing your research, and you're working with Macduff. You see?
Yeah, I mean, really, what's I've been interested about I mean, what drew me more into wine, other than it's a delicious alcoholic beverage, is that it, it is the only real product that connects you directly to a landscape. And being along the 5th generation Californian, it was an open door to really start exploring different parts of the state and getting to go down roads that you can't go down otherwise, because you're going to go to some vineyard at the end and meeting people that have, worked the land here for a long time. And it's the product that does that, right? I mean, you can say certain aspects of food do that, but it doesn't go through a human process so much as wine does. Wine really combines nature with human touch. So,
and I think to follow up on that, something, again, we're all here because of the Sanfords, right? And I think the ocean,
That's very generous of you, but
it's true, but it's all about the ocean for us, yeah, in that corridor, and especially being, with all of your oceanic background and sailing and everything else, like the Pacific is no joke, right? And I've always, there's something desolate and serene and savage at the same time about our landscape, about the ocean there, and I think to celebrate that and to corral that and actually to surrender to it is what I think all of us on the screen are doing, right? Because it's real. So be it Graham at Kick-On Ranch in Los Alamos or us in Santa Rita, it's the same thing. I mean, that the ocean pulses through the wines on a
like you said,
in a really intense way.
savage and serene.
It's both, I think. In the
Really,
ocean.
the yin and the yang. Yeah.
Right.
Aviota today just to walk on the beach for a second on the way back from Santa Barbara, and it was a little not too calm, but in the distance we could see the what do you call it, the foam,
The foam,
spume
the spume
from
of the
the spume of the huge
ocean.
waves that are going on right now.
and the white reflecting, the sun reflecting. It was just dramatic. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it always is. You know what I mean? And so to be able to harness that through the wines and to transport people to our environment, through a beverage is a huge gift.
It is. It is.
You're
huge.
right. As long as you pay attention to do that. Which everybody on the screen did.
Well, I've got.
Graham's questionable.
Just hit that
All right.
spice cabinet.
He's a work in progress.
We're all work in progress.
Yeah.
Well, we had one more guest, but I don't think he can. It was going to be Bruce McGuire from Santa Barbara Winery, which was Greg's first mentor, but he's not signing in. He might be having technical issues, which I remember that happening before. So
I think he's trying to dial in with a pager.
Very funny. This is
but let me take the chance to congratulate Greg, and we can all do a nice toast here and sign off and get on with our evenings. But Greg, congratulations again for being Wine Enthusiast Winemaker of the Year. I look forward to we are doing it's not the usual in-person gala event that the magazine does, but we are doing a virtual one, which will save us some time and travel and some nerve-wracking times talking in front of 1,000 people. We'll just be talking in front of thousands of people like this again in a couple months. So
happened, Matt.
it's in January, so we'll get the word out as to when it is. And
When are we gonna
be there?
When are we gonna catch up on all the eating we didn't do at all the galas?
I know, man.
Dinner at the Kettmann's house, I guess, is what it is.
Well, congratulations, Greg. Thank you all for joining us.
I'm so
And
happy for you, Greg.
Right.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah, great work,
Love
Greg.
you guys. Love you
deserve
all. Thank you for having me.
all right, cheers. See you soon.
Say hi to Sonia.